You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is December 3rd, 2023, and this is episode 254 of Lighthearted. My co-host today is Michelle Jewel Shaw, teacher, photographer, and chairperson of Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Jeremy, and hello to all of our listeners out there.
We will be listening to two interviews today. One will be with Laurie Perkins about the exciting things that have been happening at Tawas Point Lighthouse in Michigan, and the other will be with retired Coast Guard Rear Admiral Dan May about his new book. How's your holiday season going so far, Michelle?
So far, so good. Just had a really great Thanksgiving with family and got the Christmas tree up. This is my first year doing a fake Christmas tree, so we'll see how that goes with the animals and everything. That was why I did it. So looking forward to this holiday season. So
yeah, good. Yeah, we for years we were doing just a really small, like tabletop, fake tree with ornaments and stuff. But our crazy cat Eddie, kept trying to knock the ornaments off and stuff.
Yeah.
So we don't do that anymore. We just have garlands up high up where he can't get them.
Yep.
I want to remind our listeners about something related to lighthouses that happens at this time every year. An organization called Friends of Flying Santa visits Coast Guard stations throughout the Northeast and brings special gifts to the children of Coast Guard families. It's a really nice way of showing gratitude and appreciation for all the hard work and sacrifices of Coast Guard personnel and their families who do so much for us. Michelle, I think you've been at Coast Guard Station Portsmouth Harbor in the past for the arrival of Flying Santa by helicopter. It's pretty exciting. What do you think?
Jeremy, I actually have never been there when the helicopter has come. No.
Oh.
I've been there for the event that we typically do on Columbus Day with Friends of Flying Santa, but I've never been at the station when the helicopter actually arrives.
Oh, geez, I must have dreamed it. Yeah, that's too bad. You'll have to get there. They've already come and gone to Station Portsmouth Harbor this year, but next year we'll have to make sure you get there.
Definitely.
Of course, it's been an odd year for us. We haven't been at the lighthouse much for reasons we've talked about many times on the podcast. The missing footbridge out to the lighthouse.
Yes.
But hopefully next year things will be back to normal. But it's so exciting when Santa lands by helicopter and Santa gets out with presents for the kids. I've been at a number of places when they arrive by helicopter, and when Santa gets out, invariably there's one little kid, usually a little girl, who has to run up ahead of everybody else and hug Santa.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, the Flying Santa is a great tradition. It dates back to 1929. Originally, presents were dropped out of a plane for lighthouse keepers and their families. It's kind of changed in recent years to kind of thank the Coast Guard, to show gratitude to the Coast Guard. You can read all about it at flyingsanta.org. You can also donate through the website, and donations help to keep the tradition going. So let's get to our first interview for today. Please help me out, Michelle.
Sure, Jeremy. Daniel R. May graduated with a degree in ocean engineering from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut, in the class of 1979. During his time as the ocean engineer for the 5th Coast Guard District, Dan worked on lighthouse projects from Delaware Bay to the Carolinas, along with other engineering projects involving buoys and other structures on the water.
Dan eventually moved to Civil Engineering Unit Providence, Rhode Island, where he served as the project engineer for several major lighthouse projects, including the relocation of Block Island Southeast Light, the first move of a major lighthouse structure in the United States. Dan served as the commander of Coast Guard Group Boston from 2001 to 2004, and he retired as a Rear Admiral in 2013.
Dan is the author of a new book published by the U.S. Lighthouse Society called Preserving America's Lighthouses, Memoirs of a Coast Guard Ocean Engineer. The book details his experience with several major lighthouse projects through his decades with the Coast Guard.
It was my honor and pleasure to help with the publication of the book, along with our friend Cindy Johnson, who is the copy editor. I recently had a chance to chat with Dan May about the new book, so let's listen to that conversation now. I am speaking this afternoon with my good friend Dan May. And first of all, Dan, we're speaking a couple of days before Thanksgiving, so I want to wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Jeremy. Same to you.
Thank you. The U.S. Lighthouse Society has just published a new book about your career as an ocean engineer for the Coast Guard. The book is called Preserving America's Lighthouses, Memoirs of a Coast Guard Ocean Engineer. Congratulations on the book being
Thank you.
published. You're very welcome. And I was very honored to kind of play a part in kind of shepherding the book along. And
You did a
I'm so happy.
fantastic job, Jeremy. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, the material is just fantastic. So very, very pleased to be a small part of that. So let's talk a bit today about the subject matter covered in the book. Of course, we can't talk about everything. First of all, we don't have time. And second of all, people need to get the book to read more detail. And I'll also mention that we just did a Zoom event the other day for the Society. We did a live Zoom event. That is now available on YouTube. If people go to the U.S. Lighthouse Society or USLHS YouTube channel, they can find that very easily. And we've also done a podcast interview in the past. It was actually divided into 2 episodes. That's another way people can get more detail about your career. But the book, they need to get the book if they're interested in any of this. First of all, to make it clear, you are now retired from the Coast Guard, right?
I am, correct. Yep.
Yeah. And what was your rank when you retired?
I retired as a rear admiral, which means I hung around a long time, like 33 and a half years.
That was my next question. So 33 and a half years, that's your total time in the Coast Guard.
Total active duty time, 4 years at the illustrious U.S. Coast Guard Academy. So about 37 and a half years. I didn't have to worry about a wardrobe every morning. You got up, you put on the originally blacks and khakis, now called Bender Blue, named after Admiral Bender.
Well, my uniform I get into every day is jeans and a hoodie. That's my official uniform, so I don't have to
with a
worry
lighthouse hat.
Yeah, and always a lighthouse hat as well. That's
I love it.
Get that. Yeah. What were some of the most interesting or memorable lighthouse projects you worked on as an engineer over the years?
Yeah, I think, and I spend a chapter on each. There's three real biggies that I would say national level, groundbreaking, innovative, not your run of the mill. Some of them had never been done before, so literally groundbreaking. But Montauk Light, the revetment, I start with a chapter on that. And it was my project was designing a 5,000 ton, that's 10 million pounds of rock. But it was the creativeness of the design, I think, and it true to its ability to withstand the forces of Mother Nature. It's still standing today, and it served as a jumping off point for the last few years of the work that's been done there. So just so proud of that. And it's worked out really well. And then the other 2 were moving lighthouses, Block Island Southeast, which was the first move of a major lighthouse structure in America of that nature. 2,000 tons is what that structure weighed, which is pretty significant. So to be part of that, and it was a team effort that I took the lead for the Coast Guard, but there were so many other people involved in that project that made it work. International Chimney, expert house movers, obviously the Block Island Southeast Foundation, Dr. Abbott, and the whole host of folks out there. And then moving Highland Light, Churro, and the intricate part of that project was that there were no funds. It was easier to move Highland Light than it was, especially after we learned a good bit on Block Island. But the interesting part of that project, when I got handed it, was just to do a study. There were no funds whatsoever to move that lighthouse. And through some creative wheeling and dealing and just mostly on my own effort, working with other state and federal, I was able to cobble together $1.5 million to pull it off. And the reason I worked so hard on that was I knew if we didn't do that, it was going to be on the beach down below. It was 35 feet from the edge of the bluff to the lighthouse when I started the project. So I knew I had to get some way, somehow, to find the funds.
Yeah. So those really are some of the most prominent lighthouse projects of the last 30 years.
And I go into detail. There's a little bit of comedy too in all my wheeling and dealing. And those that, if you get the book, you can read in detail exactly how I was able to maneuver all these deals between everybody and his brother to get it together. But
Yeah.
it was quite the orchestra there to try to curtail and put together.
Yeah. I think maybe you should be Secretary of State of the United States because you have such great negotiating skills. You really have a talent for that, for making it a win-win situation for everybody
Well, thanks,
involved.
Jeremy. Yeah, there's a couple of people, and including a good friend I've known for many years, who, as I just finished up the project down at Montauk that we'll talk about on 5 December, said, Dan, you've got a knack for getting people to agree to things, and for you to give them your ideas, and whether they are in agreement or not, they always seem to come around to agree. How do you do that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you always put a positive spin on everything, and make them realize what the common good is. I think.
Yeah, Jeremy, you're absolutely right. And that's my pitch too in the book is we're all in this together. We've got to work together. And I've always looked for common ground and look for win-win. How can we, what would you like to see? And then I look at the other side, what would you, and I try to find something in the middle of that that you can do. And I've been very blessed. I've been fortunate to pull off some of these projects that Boston Light's another one I talk about, where I can't tell you how many people told me, Dan, you're wasting your time trying to come up with some arrangement for a keeper at Boston Light. Those Coast Guard guys are going to be there forever. Okay, and we pulled it off.
Yes, you did. Yeah. Sally, of course, Sally Snowman has been there for 20 years, is now retiring. But
yeah.
We'll see what happens next. But a few minutes ago, you mentioned that on the 5th of December, we're going to do another Zoom event that evening at, I think, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And that's about the Montauk Lens project that you've been involved with lately, which is really exciting. It's absolutely amazing.
It is. No, it's a step back, if you will, but in my mind, it's a step forward, because it's one more step where a local historical society and a steward of a lighthouse has given some innovative thought to a project and been able to come up with the financial resources and the backing of the folks, everyone there at Montauk. I think we were getting cheers from the whole community when they turned on that light and it was back rotating, that lens rotating, which, as you've seen the pictures, makes this marvelous sweep of light. And one of the local folks there that I got to know emailed me and said, "Hey, Dan, I just wanted to share this with you." He's got to be a good 7-8 miles from the lighthouse, but his house is on an elevation. He said, "Yeah, I was in my upstairs. I can see the sweep of the light, and it is absolutely awesome." I couldn't believe he shared that with me, but it was pretty cool. So yeah, that'll be a great project to talk about on the 5th.
Yeah, yeah. Just so a little more detail about that. It's a 3.5 order lens. Is that correct?
3.5 Fresnel clamshell lens, or bivalve, however you want to term it, but absolutely gorgeous lens that served in that lighthouse for more than 80 years, that we've restored and put back in as the operational ATON. And kudos to the Coast Guard. We'll talk about this more and how this came about.
But December 5th,
it was a collaborative effort, and it was up to me to find that, as we just talked about, I had to find that happy medium that would make this a beneficial project for both the Coast Guard and the local community.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the part you played on that. And it's just, I saw the lens in the museum in May, and to think it's back in the lantern is kind of a miracle. So we'll talk more about that in the Zoom event on December 5th. So in your career as an engineer, you did other things besides lighthouse projects, of course.
Now, I talk about some of these in the book because as an ocean engineer, you're designing, maintaining structures on or in the water. And of course, that includes buoys. And so during my Coast Guard career, I did work on a number of buoy projects. Some were national level, groundbreaking projects as well that I think the reader will find interesting. And of course, there's always some challenge in there, and I always seem to find a little bit of humor in some of. There's a couple of projects there where as much as I had put everything together, they almost fell apart in some weird way, but luckily I was able to put them all back together. But yeah, no, it's as an ocean engineer, you just get your hands in anything having to do with a structure on or near the water.
Dan, so for a while you were actually was it senior engineer at Civil Engineering Unit, Providence, Rhode Island? So you were involved with lighthouses all over.
Yeah, no, that's correct, Jeremy. I headed up the ocean engineering section, and about halfway through I spent 4 years there. Loved every minute of it. About halfway through that, our commanding officer asked me if I would take up our real property section, which at that time was really involved in the lighthouse community with license and leases. And eventually we took that further, but that was an addition to my job as an engineer. But I loved it because it kept me in that world of lighthouses. And as we talked about, and as I shared in the book, we ended up making, again, some national level major accomplishments through that work.
What do you think is your what kind of overall conclusions did you come to about lighthouse preservation when you're in these roles?
Yeah, no, and I talk about this as I go through the book. I mean, early in my career, I just fell in love with lighthouses, and I love working on them and supporting the Coast Guard and the Coast Guard's effort. When I came to New England in '91 and at the CEU Providence began working on some of these major level projects, we also unfortunately had a number of storms, from the perfect storm, several other nor'easters, and it became very clear to me that there's no way the Coast Guard is going to be able to, both financially and from a work load standpoint, be able to take on maintaining these structures alone. I also realized that there was a great resource out there in the private sector with these nonprofit groups, cities and towns that had historical societies that wanted a role in lighthouse management, historic preservation. So those two realizations just motivated me to keep working at this. And as I look back now, and as we've shared, it's just amazing to see the tremendous work, and also from what the society has done as well. The U.S. Lighthouse Society has been very much involved in a lot of this and actually help support the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act. So to see that now, looking back, it just really pleases me to see how far we've really come from that time.
Yeah, it's been great to see the partnership over the years between the Coast Guard and various nonprofits and different agencies locally that are taking care of these lighthouses. For the most part, it's worked out beautifully. Let me ask you this question. I don't think I asked this exact question before, but if you have to single out one thing, and I'm sure this is not easy, maybe it could be a couple of things. What has been your favorite thing about your work as an ocean engineer for the Coast Guard?
Well, thanks, Jeremy. It's interesting. I could think of a bunch from an engineering or sense of accomplishment, but I'll tell you what, really, it's the people. It's the people, from the people that I've met along the way to the people like Charlie Baines, Harry Duvall, people like yourself, Jeremy, that have dedicated themselves to working on the preservation of lighthouses. And that's what has been, I think, the most joy out of all this. And I have a little saying, I mentioned it in the book too, you meet the nicest people at lighthouses. And I continue to find that today. I might have mentioned this at the podcast, but we maybe not. We did some tours out at the local lighthouse here in Newburyport, Plum Island Light, and I met a young couple that I was given a tour, and they were the nicest people, young. I say they're probably in their 30s, probably early 30s, if that. Believe it or not, they were on their honeymoon. And this was their honeymoon. They had just gotten married. Their honeymoon was going up the coast of Mass into Maine to visit and tour Lighthouse. I don't think I ever ran into anybody else that had a honeymoon that involved touring Lighthouse, but they were the nicest people. I ended up getting some feedback from them, and we shared a bunch of information. And they had a phenomenal time. I did give them some ideas and some thoughts of where to go, what to do, and they were very thankful for that. But that just sums up my comment about you meet the nicest people, and you simply do. And that's what I think I've enjoyed the most.
As you're speaking, I'm just thinking that often when I ask people these kind of questions, they talk about the people. And I like to say it's the people that brought these places to life historically, the keepers and other people involved with lighthouses in history. But it's the same thing continuing right up through the present. It's the people that really make this all special.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. So let me mention again that we did this live Zoom event the other day. And if people get on the U.S. Lighthouse Society YouTube channel, you can get on YouTube and search for USLHS. There's a lot of videos on there, and the most recent one is the event we just did, so people can watch that. I think it was an excellent event. You gave a PowerPoint presentation on your career, outlining the material that's in the book. And for people who want to get the book, they can get it on Amazon. Again, the title of the book is Preserving America's Lighthouses, Memoirs of a Coast Guard Ocean Engineer. It's online at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. And as we speak, it'll be put into the U.S. Lighthouse Society online shop as well. But it's pretty easy to find, and I obviously recommend it to anybody interested in lighthouse history, Coast Guard history, preservation of historic structures, et cetera, et cetera. It's a must read. Thank you for everything you've done, Dan, and thank you for talking with me today.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. And I think as you hinted at there, you were a big part of that, helping me put all the material together and getting us to the publication. So thank you for that. We share in that bond of getting this book out, and I hope everyone does enjoy it. I think they'll find it interesting. There's a lot in the book that gives you the story behind the story. So hopefully they'll enjoy that.
Exactly. And I also want to do a quick shout out to our friend Cindy Johnson, who is responsible for a lot of copy editing on the book as well. So can't forget her. And of course, often co-host of the podcast. So Dan, thank you again. And I'm sure, we'll be talking, of course, at the event on December 5th at 7:00 in the evening, live Zoom event. If people go to the USLHS website under What's New. If as we speak, if it's not on there yet, it will be very soon. I think it will be by the time people hear this. Again, under What's New on the front of the website, they can sign up for that. They can register for the event. And I hope a lot of our listeners will take part in that as well. So thank you again, Dan, and happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Dan May's book, Preserving America's Lighthouses, Memoirs of a Coast Guard Ocean Engineer, is available from online booksellers including Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
So let's go now to our next interview.
Sure, Jeremy. Tawas Point Lighthouse is located in Tawas Point State Park in the northeastern part of Michigan's Lower Peninsula. The light station was established in 1853, but shifting sands caused Tawas Point to be extended by more than a mile, and the station had to be rebuilt. A new lighthouse was completed in 1877. The state of Michigan acquired Tawas Point Light Station from the Coast Guard in 2002. Today, it's one of the 12 sites that comprise the Michigan History Center.
Laurie Perkins is the Southern Lower Peninsula Historian for the Michigan History Center, which means she is the historian for the Mann House, Tawas Point Lighthouse, and Walker Tavern. She also coordinates the Keeper program at Tawas Point Lighthouse. I recently had the chance to speak with Laurie about the recent restoration of the lighthouse and what they call the Keepers program, which was returning after an absence of a few years. So let's listen to my conversation with Laurie Perkins now. I'm speaking today with Laurie Perkins, who is the Southern Lower Peninsula Historian for the Michigan History Center and also the manager of the Lighthouse Keeper program at Tawas Point Lighthouse in Michigan. Thank you so much for being with me today, Laurie.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's always good to be back.
Yeah, well, this is the third time I've had you on the podcast,
It is.
It's nice, really nice to see and talk to you again. We last talked early last year. I think it was in January of 2022, and quite a bit's been happening since that, I understand. Without going into tremendous detail right off the bat here, what are the major things that have been happening there?
Well, at the Lighthouse, we've just undergone a close to $500,000 restoration of the tower at Tawas Point Lighthouse, and it was long overdue. It had been about 25 years since we had first done restoration on the tower, and so it was needed, and we received funds from the federal government through America Cares Act. So very happy to receive those funds, and it turned out beautifully.
Wow. What is the America Cares program? I haven't heard of that before.
It was part of the COVID funding that the Biden administration had passed out to state governments to do long overdue work, historic buildings. Lighthouse is certainly one of those.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
We had a concrete parge applied to the exterior about 25 years ago, and it was not allowing the bricks to breathe. And that parge was kind of eating away. The bricks were popping. The parge itself was falling off, and the metal lantern galleries areas were rusting, and we just needed a lot of work done that we were not getting accomplished on our own. So,
yeah, well, I know that kind of thing has happened at a lot of lighthouses where certain coatings were put on that really shouldn't have been because they kind of trapped the moisture. People did the best they could with what the knowledge they had at that time, but I think we've learned a lot about those things. Yeah,
we're back to the old lighthouse keeper standard where the crew painted the tower with a lime wash every year, and so we're going to be, our next job is trying to find a rotation where we can go through and keep those lime wash paints up and keep the tower looking great. So,
So I was going to ask you about that. I was reading a little bit about that. So tell me more about the is it correctly called a paint, or is it called a lime wash? Or?
It's a breathable paint, but it's basically what looks like a lime wash, and it goes on just, with a roller and a brush, and just like the lighthouse keepers would have done. It's been placed all over the exterior of the tower, and then the restoration crew went in with other approved paints and painted all the metal and painted the interior of the tower as well, and so it's really looking good. So yeah, we're not the only lighthouse in Michigan that's getting this treatment done. As you mentioned, there are others, and so it's just like you said, keeping up with the most recent technology and going back to something that worked 100 years ago.
Yeah,
only we had a resident keeper who could go over the side in a sling and work his way down from the top. So,
right.
Not too many people are doing that these days. Not me, for sure.
Not me either. No, and I know you can't exactly have volunteers do that these days for a lot of reasons. But so you must have had was it a local contractor that actually did the job?
Actually, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources that we're a part of contracted with MIM. MIHM. They're a Michigan-based company. This is their 23rd lighthouse that they've completed here in Michigan, and so they know exactly what to do and how to do it, and it was an amazing project. And they actually got started in February and encased the whole lantern space in plastic and then run salamander in through a bottom window that shot heat up to the top, and that light from the salamander made a glow, literally, from their work lights, and the salamander looked like a giant Roman candle up there all through February and March. And they worked in the dark at night and afternoons because it doesn't get too dark or light in Michigan and the winter. So it was quite an experience to watch them scaffold. It was kind of like it was in the round, and yet it had a slope to it, and that kind of thing. And they actually box the lens. We have our lens, our fourth order lens is still in the tower. Mm-hmm. And they crated that so that they weren't going to drop a hammer or something like that, or spray paint on it or anything. So
crated it in the lantern room, though. Yes. Didn't remove it from there.
No, they did not remove it. They crated it in the lantern room.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've seen that done before anywhere quite like that. That's neat.
Yeah, it was amazing to watch it.
Yeah, I'll bet. Did I hear you correctly a few minutes ago? Did you say that is that going to have to be the painting of the exterior, or using that lime wash? Is that going to be done every year from now on? Or?
Well, anywhere from 1 to 3 years, depending on weather conditions and how it weathers through this first year. I think we'll know more once we've gone a year with it.
Yeah.
But it'll have to have irregular applications. Of it just to keep it looking great. So.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Like you were saying, it's like in a lot of cases, I think people are realizing the old ways of doing things were often the best.
Yes.
And another thing that's happening is that the Coast Guard seems more open to the idea of some of the historic Fresnel lenses actually being put back in lighthouses where they were removed. Putting them back in, and they become a light is installed inside them, and they are the aid to navigation. So that's starting to happen in a few places, and it's. I said to a newspaper reporter recently, the old is new again. So it's neat because again, often those are the best ways. Well, let me ask you two questions more about the restoration. Were any other buildings worked on as part of that restoration?
No, not this time. No, the Friends of Tawas have restored the oil house that's on site, but that's closer to the ground and a much smaller structure than doing the tower. But they completed that project, I would say 2-3 years ago, just before COVID hit, and they put the same kind of paint on it, and they're having to go through every year and paint it to keep it up and running. No other historic structures on the site. So.
Yeah. Anything else planned at this point?
Not from our side of the equation. We're looking at new interpretive exhibits in the keepers' quarters, and we're looking at some refurbishing of the keeper dwelling area where the volunteer keepers live. We haven't gone in there in maybe a decade yet, and refresh the paint and that kind of thing. So we're hoping to do that in the spring, and then everything will be done inside and out. So.
Yeah. Not like it'll be done forever. These things are never actually finished.
Yeah.
You got to go back and do, there's always something that's time to get done. Yeah.
Like painting the Mackinac Bridge, you start at one end, and by the time you get to the other, you're back and painting it back the other way. So,
yeah. I've driven across that. Yeah, it is pretty serious bridge. So speaking of the Keeper's House, we talked a little bit when we talked before on the podcast about the Lighthouse Keeper program, as it's called there, and you manage that. Can you give the basics of what is that program? How does it work?
Well, it was on suspension last year, obviously, because of the construction, and then it was on suspension because of COVID. So in my tenure there, which is about 6 years now, we've actually completed a season of it about 3 times. But what we have is the ability to let volunteers actually live in the lighthouse. We can sleep up to 4 people. We have a full kitchen, full bath, dining area, and 2 bedrooms. All you have to bring is your bed linens and your towels, that kind of thing. And you come, you stay. There's an application process for which we're going to be bringing the Keeper program back in January of next year. So just probably 10 weeks from now, the application will be up, and we're taking applications from anywhere in the United States. You only have to be 18 years of age, be able to climb 85 steps. And we go through some training. I have Zoom meetings now. It's one of the things that came out of COVID was our ability to Zoom. And I can now train lighthouse keepers all around the country all at the same time. And it's really kind of fun to have people from North Carolina meet people from Michigan and back and forth. And so we do a couple-day training with everybody. And then as your time gets closer, we do individual teams of 4 trainings. So we encourage people to apply in teams of 4. It works out for safety reasons. We have to have one person at the top of the tower, one person at the bottom of the tower, just to get people up and down safely. And then we have one person that kind of does the history of the other period rooms in the lower level of the keepers area. And then we have one person who is kind of the troubleshooter and counts the people and kind of is the gatekeeper, because we can only get about 20 people. This is a very small lighthouse, 20 people in it in every hour. So keepers do 5 rotations a day. For 6 days, they get a day off, they repeat, and at the end of 2 weeks, their time is done. We charge $250 a person. And then we also have the $10 application fee. Mm-hmm. So there are about 12 weeks to choose from mid-May to mid-October. And folks can come in and pick a date, pick a week, 2 weeks that they want to stay, and then fill out that application. It gets reviewed. We do background checks. And then you commence giving tours the day after you get there. And then the rest of the time, mornings and evenings are your own. You can, if you're a painter and you want to paint, if you like reading, composing poetry or music, whatever floats your boat, so to speak. Tour the area. There's lots to see in the Tawas area. We have the National Lumbermen's Memorial. We have Alpena, which is up on this is all on the sunrise side of Michigan. I'm assuming all your listeners know that Michigan is shaped like a mitten. Yeah. And so just above the thumb is where Tawas is located. And so Alpena is at the top of your first finger. And then, of course, the Upper Peninsula, Mackinac Bridge, Mackinac Island are all a 2-hour drive away, as is Detroit if you want to go south. If you've never seen the big city of Detroit, we're within a 2-hour drive from there, too. So it's fun. It's an opportunity to get to meet people and come stay in a lighthouse. How often do you get to do that, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's always a treat. What a great program. So we're speaking actually November 20th, a few days before Thanksgiving, and this interview will be posted on December 3rd. So people will be hearing it then. So about you say weeks. Applications will start in January?
January 8th. January 8th, they'll go live. And you just go to our Michigan History Center website, which is www.michigan.gov/Tawas Lighthouse. TAWAS Lighthouse, all one word. So click on that. The application should be there, knock wood. January the 8th. It'll be up about a month. It'll close around the 10th of February. And by the middle of March, you should be notified if you're accepted as a keeper. So if you don't hear from me by the end of March, probably you were not chosen to be a keeper. But most everybody, although that first year that I was here, we had 1,100 applications to be lighthouse keepers. So you never know. We could get a big influx or a small influx. It just depends on.
Yeah. I was going to ask you how many you might expect.
It's hard to say. We could go anywhere from 50 applications to 1,000.
Yeah. And maybe the fact that you haven't done it in a few years might mean there'd be more this time.
Yes.
Or less, but it's so hard to predict. Yeah.
It is. But it's fun.
Can people who've done it before come back?
Yes, we've had a couple of requests for that because we had a bye year, so to speak, last year. I'm going to let people who were there 2 years and 4 years ago come back into the system. But we encourage new folks, folks that have done this before. Whatever combination of folks we can get is always fun to read the applications and go from there. We also instituted a keeper uniform, so that $10 application fee, it applies to your Lighthouse Keeper t-shirt. And it was a beautiful t-shirt 2 years ago. It was like powder blue with a big compass points on the front And then on the back, it said volunteer lighthouse keeper. Beautiful. Everybody loved them. Yeah. So that's your gift, or your $10 remittance return if you are accepted by application. So.
It seems in a lot of ways to me it could be a model program for a lot of places. I know there's at least a couple other Michigan lighthouses that might have similar programs.
Yes,
St. Helene Island, I believe, is something kind of similar for one.
Yeah, the Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association up in Sheboygan manages those other properties, and you can also link to them to find out what other opportunities are available besides our program here at Tawas.
Yeah, I've had a couple of people from that organization on the podcast.
Yeah,
people refer to it as GLICA, the Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association. Great organization. Yeah, been around a long time. So I was looking at some other things on the website for the lighthouse. Something called the brick paver program, for one thing, where people can donate and get a memorial brick, right?
Yes. That is a very popular program. It's sponsored by our friends of Tawas Point Lighthouse group, and they sell individual paver bricks. They get them engraved with whatever, how many words you can fit on a brick. And there aren't too many, but you can get your name in memory of, in honor of. You can dedicate a brick to somebody else. You can honor an anniversary or a birthday. And we have the whole pathway leading up to the lighthouse and over to our gift shop and to the oil house. It's quite a large area. And they actually are starting to narrow down to run out of room. They're thinking about expanding, but you can get information for that on the Friends of Tawas Point Lighthouse website, which is different than the Michigan History Center website I gave earlier. So if you go to the Friends of Tawas, there is a link, I think, to that brick campaign. You just fill out a form, send your check, send the information that you want on your brick, and they wait till they get, I think, maybe a dozen bricks, I think, before they actually order them. And then, because the monument company that does them has to have so many bricks to work on, they don't just do one off and stop. They like to do multiples. And so they're doing that to raise funds for projects that they sponsor there at the park. Their friends group is not only for the lighthouse, but also for the state park as well.
You mentioned the website. I don't know if it's a simple URL we can give for the website for Friends of Tawas Point Lighthouse.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think if you Google Friends of Tawas Point Lighthouse, you'll get both their Facebook and their website, which again are two different things. So, and their Facebook is very popular. I mean, if you want to know anything about anything going on at Tawas Point, from bird migrations to what the local foxes are doing, popping out of their dens, this time of year, to the phases of the moon, to the lighthouse, they do photo contests periodically. They have the photo of the month that they post for the park, and it's a really nice, it's one of the nicer Facebook pages I've been to. So if you become a member, you can automatically get involved with the Facebook page, and you can get a lot of quick information by going to either site. But those are operated by the Friends of Tawas Point Lighthouse.
Great. Yeah, the brick paver program is an excellent idea. And I know it's been done at some other places near me here where I am. Plum Island Lighthouse in Newburyport, Mass. Has a very similar program, and it's done they've done really well there.
In fact, they have a map showing where each of the bricks are located, and then they have a little game they play with the kids, find the certain bricks. And so, it's become an educational tool as well as a memorial to people who are interested in lighthouses.
There's also something called the Lighthouse Pavilion that's in the works. I guess that's also a project of the Friends of Tawas Point Lighthouse. Is that right?
That is a project of the Friends of Tawas Point Lighthouse. And they've done some fantastic fundraising activities over the last, I would say, year and a half, and really gotten the community involved. They do they do everything from golf scrambles to souvenir sales. They've gotten some major corporations, like our power company here in Michigan is Consumers Energy, and they've donated $15,000 to the project. And so it runs the walk of life. They've really reached out to the community, and the community has embraced that pavilion. Yes.
When you have been on the podcast twice before, we got somewhat into the history of the lighthouse. The last time we didn't talk about that at all, but maybe just recap a little bit of that. I'm just wondering, for you as a historian, maybe there are one or two or three or four things that really stand out for you in your mind when you think of the history of Tawas Point Lighthouse.
Sure. I think the first thing is that this is the lighthouse that we've been talking about that you can live in, is actually the second lighthouse on Tawas Point. Tawas Point is a constant movement of sand and waves and wind, and creating miles of new beach and new land every year. And then the first lighthouse was 1853. The second lighthouse that we just did the restoration work on was built in 1876, 77, and opened to navigation on May 2nd, 1877. And we're actually planning an event for next year to reopen the lighthouse on May 2nd, which was the first day that the lamp was lit for that navigational season in 1877. So it's like the 147th, 49th lighting of the lens. And so that's the day we've chosen to honor that restoration project and to get the lighthouse back up and running and get our keepers back in and get our Friends group back in doing tours. And so next year on May 2nd will be a big event for us, but that's the big thing. One of the projects that we did, because we couldn't get inside the lighthouse and we did not have keepers last summer, was to hire a student interpreter. We've had them periodically off and on over the years. And this particular person, their name was Ken Phillips. And Ken did a lot of research when it was raining outside. You know, we can't be outside with an umbrella giving tours at a lighthouse. So I sent them to the library to do research where, as I mentioned, we're looking at upgrading our exhibits and our interpretive plan there. And we want to figure out, besides the male lighthouse keepers, who else was involved in and around Tawas Point and the lighthouse. Because we know it's a navigational device. We know it's important to the economy of the area. So what other groups of people impacted that lighthouse? And so Ken did research through the census and local newspapers on Native Americans and also African Americans, and trying to kind of flesh out what Tawas, there are two Tawases. I don't know if your listeners know that. There's the East Tawas, where the lighthouse is, and there's also Tawas City. And they run right up against each other. So it's referred to as the Tawases. And both of them are on either side of the Tawas River that flows into the bay, in Tawas Bay. And that whole area was lumber, as many things in Michigan were involved in the late 19th century. It was a lumber town. And so you're cutting trees all around the northern forests of Michigan and using local rivers and tributaries to move logs down to sawmills, which are usually on the mouth of major rivers. And so Tawas was one of those major lumbering communities. And so who was involved in that community? Who lived there? What jobs did they have? You know, what were their lives like? Are there women? Are there children in these communities? Those kinds of things. And how did lighthouse keepers and that lighthouse interact with those communities? And so we're just starting to sort of crack that nut. And Ken was very influential in digging up a lot of information that I quite frankly didn't have time to do, because I managed two other sites in the state's museum system. So this is not the only site that I'm at. So they were able to do a lot of work this summer when it was raining and cold and not able to get out and meet the public. Although, in the meeting the public side, they were able to talk to over 8,000 visitors over the summer. And that's quite a few people talking face to face, just one person. So I was quite happy with how that Ken worked out. And how the program worked out for this summer. So we still kept the public engaged. They could still watch the restoration work going on and still learn a lot about lighthouses.
So before we move on, anything else about the history? Like, are there any particular interesting personalities, keepers, people like that in the history of the lighthouse?
Well, that we haven't really gotten into. It's been the framework of keepers. They came at this date, they served till this date. And I don't think we really have gotten into the depth of their lives like we have wanted to. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we're going to be doing here.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you never know when somebody might come out of the woodwork who's a descendant of a keeper or something like that.
Oh, they do. Oh, well, in that regard, yes, they do all the time. We have one of the members of the Friends is a daughter of the last Coast Guardsman to serve at Tawas Point. So, yeah, we have contacts with family all over the country. So, yes.
But so that must fill in some detail.
Yeah, and in fact, the most recent, this daughter that I referred to, her father, she donated to the museum her father's work clothes, his jumpsuit uniform kind of a thing, his not bibs, but mechanic suit kind of a thing, to the museum's collection to be displayed at the lighthouse when we get everything up and running. She also donated his notebook where he kept notes on how to keep the fog signal running. Those are rare things because people don't tend to keep their work clothes, especially men. They wear them out, and then they throw them away or pass them on. And so people tend to say Class A uniforms and all of that. But she had given those as well, but she also gave his day-to-day work uniform. And I was so thrilled with that. So we're going to try and get that on exhibit at some point. But yeah, you don't normally see that. And it really brings the everyday functioning of the lighthouse down to real people. That's not the officers necessarily that come by and salute every day. It's and go away. It's the actual person who's doing the job to maintain this navigational device because it's important. Without it, ships would go down. And so I'm really excited about that. The most recent donation that came in the last couple of years. So very excited about that.
Yeah. Well, that's it's definitely the most important part of the history is the people, both lighthouse service, the civilian keepers, and then the Coast Guard keepers and their families.
Yes,
that's what brings these places to life for sure.
And we're trying to capture those every time someone raises their hand and says, "I'm a descendant of." We try and do an interview with them or take as many frantic notes as we can at the time that they're there, and they come back or they'll give me a call if I'm not there when they're there. And that kind of thing. So, yeah.
I'm just going to mention something in case people listening are hearing some noise in the background. There's some work or cleaning going on in your home, and I don't want to we can't stop the wheels of progress. You got to get that done.
No, it's 3 days before Thanksgiving, and I have a house full of company coming. But I do apologize to your listeners. I do. This has been the long end of I would say, 3-month odyssey to my life recently. On August 28th or thereabouts of this year, we had a tornado go right past our front door and took out 12 65-foot pine trees in our backyard. And in fact, I have a work crew right now working outside of my house, cutting up those trees, and they've been here now for 2 days. So we had that, and then we had a flood in our another part of our house, and it's just been one disaster after another. So,
well, I'm glad you're laughing. I guess that's a good sign.
We were lucky. When the tornado came through, we lost power for a week, so we lost all the food in our freezers. So we went down to the basement to check on those a couple days later, only to be walking through squishy carpet. So we had to go in and tear out all the carpeting and then repaint, refloor, it's just one thing after another.
I guess so.
But you didn't call in just to hear my woes. So
Well, no, but I'm sure everybody listening
that's
sympathizes.
why
Yeah, yeah.
they're trying to get the last of the construction out of the house in time for the holidays. So.
Absolutely. That's sad about all those trees, but I'm sure glad your house
Oh,
wasn't hit directly. I mean,
yes. Well, several houses in the area lost roofs. We were very fortunate we did not lose a roof. Our farm here was, the house was built in 1880, and it weathered the storm really well. We have some massive old growth trees in our yard. And the tornado went right through, and I was tossing semis around on our major highway on the I-94 down near Detroit. And so we were lucky. It was just starting to form up at where we are, and then took off and made even worse disasters in other places. So we were fortunate in the long run to have survived the way we did.
I know it's hard to see things that way sometimes, but
Yeah, it's just taken a long time to get everything back into its proper place.
yeah.
But I apologize to the
No,
viewers.
not at all. I'm glad things are as okay as they are.
Yes, yeah.
You mentioned a while ago that you're involved as the historian for the Southern Lower Peninsula of the Michigan History Center, that you're involved with a couple other properties. Could you just mention a little bit about what those
Yes,
are?
actually, there are two other properties. Both are further south of Tawas. Again, if you look at that mitten shape of Michigan, these are located down near where your wrist is on the Ohio border.
Okay.
And for those of you in New England trying to get a read on where we are in the Midwest, but just over the Ohio border, maybe half an hour, is Brooklyn, Michigan, and maybe you've heard of the Michigan International Speedway and NASCAR races. One of my historic sites butts right up against the Speedway, and we share a property line. And that particular site dates to the 1830s and was an old stagecoach inn on US 12, which was the connector between Detroit and Chicago, and also the completer for the Erie Canal, which started in Albany and went to Buffalo, and then in through Lake Erie and into Michigan, and settled up a lot of Yankees and Yorkers came to Michigan through that major route and down US 12 and past this quaint little tavern building. So that's one site. It's called Walker Tavern, named for Sylvester Walker, who was from Cooperstown, New York. The other site is in Concord, Michigan. All the folks from Concord, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts will appreciate this. The site is probably an hour southwest of Lansing, which is the capital in the middle of the state. And that house there is a Victorian two-story that was built in 1883 and was home to two sisters by the last name of Mann. And they donated their house property contents, including the soap in the soap dish, to the state of Michigan so that kids in Concord, Michigan could understand how it was when they grew up as children in the 1880s. And, people save historic houses, but they don't necessarily save the contents, or the contents have been dispersed. But in this case, this is the only family to have ever lived in this house. The parents built it, the children grew up in it, and the last sister died in 1969. And in her will, it said that it should go to the people of Michigan. So 1970, Michigan History Center began operation of the site, and it's been one of our sites for the last 53 years. And right now we're planning for a big Christmas event. We decorate the house in Victorian Christmas style, starting the first weekend in December. I'll be down in Concord and greeting folks and giving them tours of the house, and then showing off our 9-foot Christmas tree with I had volunteers who handmade all the paper ornaments using Victorian patterns to cover this 9-foot tree in the parlor. And so it's quite a nice thing for the local community to get involved with.
Oh, sounds really nice. Does anything happen related to the holidays at Tawas Point Lighthouse?
There have in the past. The volunteers there have done Christmas at the Light, which normally would have taken place this Sunday after Thanksgiving. But because of the restoration, we decided it was best just to have our big grand opening and not give people a sneak peek since we were this close to the end of the season. So that will come back next year. It's a very popular event. They get several hundred people out for that. They put up Christmas trees and decorations and lights in all the windows and such. But yeah, they'll be doing that next year. But we were so close to when they finished that there wasn't really time to turn around and clean it and get it ready to greet the public, that we decided we'd just wait till spring.
Yeah, I can understand that. So I got one final question for you for bonus points. Sure. Okay. And I believe when I had you on the podcast before, I usually ask people like you, what is your favorite thing about your association with a particular lighthouse? So I won't ask that exact question again, but I'll ask you maybe a little more specifically, what is your favorite thing about your association with the Lighthouse Keeper program at Tawas Point Lighthouse?
Oh, I love the Lighthouse Keeper program. It just opens up so many doors. People become ambassadors for this program. I get to meet people from all over the United States. They have an intense interest in lighthouses. When they're selected, they really want to be there, and it just shows. I love the enthusiasm that these folks bring to this experience, and it's an amazing thing. And I think just getting to know the various people around the country has been the most fun for me with this job. Yeah.
Well, both historically and with what we're doing today with lighthouse preservation, as we're just saying, it's the people that make it so interesting and so much fun, both in the past and the present. So, so Laurie Perkins, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast again for a third time.
Yeah. Yes.
Third time's the charm. And the other two times were great too. But it's always a pleasure, and we'll have to do it again sometime. And good luck with everything at the lighthouse. Congratulations on what's been accomplished there recently.
Yes. Oh yeah, it's been fantastic.
So Laurie, thank you so much again, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Jeremy. Happy holidays to you and your family.
If you'd like to learn more, do a Google search for Tawas Point Lighthouse. That's TAWAS Point Lighthouse. The official State of Michigan website has a kind of complicated address for the lighthouse, but it will come up at the top of your Google search results. To learn more about the Friends of Tawas Point Lighthouse and Park, visit TawasLighthouseFriends.com. The Friends also have a Facebook page.
Laurie's been on the podcast a couple of times in the past, and it was great catching up with her about everything that's been happening at Tawas Point. I got to some of Michigan last year, mostly the Upper Peninsula, but I have not gotten to Tawas Point yet. I need to change that one of these years.
Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn about tours, preservation grants, and everything the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers. If you listen to this podcast using Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us.
Before we sign off, do you have a quote for us as we start to get into winter, Michelle?
I sure do, Jeremy. The author John Steinbeck once wrote, quote, "What good is the warmth of summer without the cold of winter to give it sweetness?" End quote.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to look at it. On next week's episode, we'll be talking with the last lighthouse keeper in the United States. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thank you so much for listening, and
keep a good light.